You are going to enjoy this episode today. My guest, Mike Calise, has been a CEO and really at the forefront of the electric vehicle charging initiative. That's creating the infrastructure in our country to allow us to evolve to electric vehicles and have the ability to charge them whenever and wherever we want to. He's worked with Elon Musk, with the original Tesla. He has worked with early adopters in this industry. And again, he is going to talk about this from not a political standpoint, but from a capitalist standpoint and the opportunities for everyone. This conversation takes a lot of twists and turns. So, we're talking about Elon Musk in one breath, and then we go to this documentary that he's doing just for the love of it on electric motorcycle racing. Then we go into investing, and he gives some tips around investing and how to spot early trends, how to capitalize and make money off of the move to electric vehicles. And then we talk about life expectancy and life extension at the end. And when I ask him, the question that I ask almost everyone, how do you want to be remembered? His answer is bar none the most interesting answer I've ever gotten on this show. Enjoy. Mike is an experienced executive with a successful history of accelerating early stage businesses, and he has deep expertise in electric vehicle, EV, charging, the hardware, the software, the solutions, the business models, the clean transportation, and all the strategies that are involved in that. And you guys know this is a booming industry, and it's our future. Mike recently served as the president of the Americas for Tritium, responsible for revenue, the brand, federal policy, and growing the market share. Mike previously served as Blink Charging Company's chief executive officer. And before Blink, he was the head of North American electric vehicle solutions at Schneider Electric. And he was the founder and principal at Ebadvise, where he developed the electric vehicle charging technology plan for Marin Transportation Authority in Marin County, California. He has done a lot, and he's also a very accomplished investor. So we're gonna kind of break this podcast into three sections. So you as the listener, you get a treat today. We're going to talk about electric vehicles, the good and the bad, and maybe not the bad, but just some of the controversial around that. We're going to talk about a really cool documentary, a film documentary that Mike is doing, and then we're going to get into investing. So today's going to be chock full of learning and nuggets. But most importantly, first, let me welcome Mike to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Roger. I'm doing great. I really appreciate that. It was EV advised. Sorry for the lack of tuning you up on that, but I'm really pleased to be here. I'm excited to be here and share some great thoughts, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Me too. Well, talk about this, because EV it's not new. Electric vehicles are not new, but it's finally getting traction. I mean, and it's really getting traction, but you were there really at the beginning, like way back when. And if you could just help us understand, how in the heck did you end up in the epicenter of the electrical vehicle movement, before it became such a movement? Just talk to us about that.
Thank you. Well, let's see. Having a tech background, I got my start at Intel Corporation, electrical engineer, and came up the ranks in semiconductors, computers, software, eventually into supercomputer technology chips. And we realized at that time that we were creating massive supercompute capability to model climate change to help us decarbonize the atmosphere. And at the same time, we're incrementally heating up the atmosphere with these massive supercomputers. So I sort of endeavored down the path of low power supercomputers. And I recall I was in a bit of a hiatus, and I took my first test drive in a Tesla Roadster, the first generation.
Sure,
and the world came at me very fast and very quiet. And I realized at that point I was going to commit my mission, what I had been able to bring to low power, into transportation. And that's sort of how I got started, a little bit by accident. And I founded that group called EV Advice at the time, and just really cut my teeth and learned a lot. Actually authored one of the first guides called Electrify Your Business back around 2011 through Silicon Valley Leadership Sponsorship. So I've been in it since then, and it's taken a long time, and it'll continue to take some time, but it's absolutely imminent that it'll happen, and it'll happen in a big way.
Yeah. it seemed like it took Tesla. It took the Roadster, which I believe was like a Lotus Elise chassis that they changed, you know,
A little kid car.
But yeah, a little kid car. But man, once that S model came out, it changed the world. It changed the world when that S model came out. And there was the Chevrolet Volt before that and some other, you know, predecessors, but it was that S model where they just rethought how to build a car. What were your thoughts? So you drove the Roadster that was more of a kit car. And then, you know, I'm sure you got to drive this S, you know, an S model when it was a production model. What were your thoughts the first time you drove that production model and saw how far the technology had come?
Yes. I mean, back in the early days, you know, you have a tendency, or my tendency is to see what's expected out there in the future and where we tend to go. There's some vision involved. And a lot of people couldn't even wrap their head around this thing called an electric vehicle. And I had known Martin Eberhard, the true founder, or the original founder of Tesla. I had met Elon back in the times as well, discussing, you know, where transportation was going. When you look at it, the amount of fossil fuels required for basic needs of global transportation is intense. And yet fossil fuels are an emitter of carbon emissions. And look, we need fossil fuels. That's what the world demanded from us if we want, you know, all forms of transportation. So, you know, I'm certainly appreciative of big energy and how they were able to deliver and do some pretty difficult challenges for us to be able to transport ourselves through vehicles. But I did know then, back when the Nissan Leaf first came out, limited range, very early adopter type, very high cost. The cost of the battery alone was $30,000, which is effectively the cost of its sister car related to the ICE, which is the Nissan Versa. We knew that the business had to extend dramatically beyond the early days into really mass production vehicles. So the first time that Tesla Model S came out, and I believe Elon did a great job here, is he made EVs cool and sexy. You know, at the time they were a little, pardon me, dorky and very nerdy, and, you know, they showed promise. But Elon had really changed the whole attitude around EVs, and then subsequently came out with the production vehicles. And now it's a very competitive field, which is really good for the industry. We can talk about today's market and sort of the ups and downs, the roadblocks, and then where do we go from here. But that was certainly paramount when the first, you know, mid-sedan, sport, luxury sedan came out, as well as the Model X. And then really the breakthrough is when the Model 3 and the Model Y came out, which is really more for the masses.
Yeah, more affordable, for sure, for sure. So I would love to, just so the listeners know, because you and I did a very short, just to get to know each other before we went live here. And on the political spectrum, you're more conservative, but just from being, you know, an engineer, a scientist, you can't argue with the data. And so you see that, you know, we do have climate change, no matter what people want to argue, like the data is the data. But I think it's important for the listeners to know you're not coming at this from a super, you know, I'm just going to be cavalier here, but, you know, a super liberal, you know, I'm a left wing, you know, got to stop all that. Like, you're when I got to talk with you, you're very pragmatic about the approach to making this transition. I think that that's important for the listeners to know. But let's talk about then, what are the challenges? What are the roadblocks? We know this is where we're going as a world. Electric will be the future, but I've rented a Tesla. I don't own a Tesla, but I've rented one before, and I ran out of power, and I had to go charge, and I had to sit there for 45 minutes. And I was like, you know, this isn't quite ready for me prime time yet for me, right. You know? But I love the vehicle. I mean, the vehicle was amazing. So what are the challenges? What are the roadblocks? What's coming next?
Sure. Well, thank you. And going back to the sort of political side, I'm still surprised that it seems like a political punching bag as to whether you support clean energy or not. And at the end of the day, I'm a capitalist. I've been in the capital markets ever since the first days at Intel, in the stock market, knowing how important capitalism, true differentiation of product, disruptive innovations, how you can make profits feed those profits back into doing great services, improve the way we live, look at opportunities and how we can capture great disruptive innovations. We see this every day, whether it's our cell phones or flat panel displays or streaming data, the internet. I mean, there's a myriad of different examples. And this is another example of a disruptive, clean innovation. So I take this from a purely business standpoint. And frankly, if you want to establish a strong business model, that should never be relegated or reliant on government support. So government support certainly helps. Government subsidies have been subsidizing the oil industry since the beginning of when they started. And so you sort of accept that along the way, but you never build your business models around government subsidies. You have to stand alone, make profit as a standalone entity. So, you know, when you look at the Americas today, we're actually behind in this technology. So it's a bit ironic where Elon and Tesla came out very early on, and yet Europe and China have surpassed us in the amount of EV adoption. And China certainly is leading right now, and America is third. So I sort of set out a mission to get us back in the saddle, get us in the fastest growth market to this transition. And so you also mentioned the importance of what it's like and what are the challenges. I can tell you that one of the tremendous advantages of these vehicles is the way they drive. I mean, take all the climate change stuff out of it. These things are incredibly fast off the line. And yes, I measure this off the line because that's what we can do in our daily travels. We could get in and out of places quickly, you know, without going 150 on the highway. I'm not speaking of that type. I'm speaking of really peppy, really strong off the line. And they're so quiet. So I understand that a lot of people in the automotive industry love the sound of their Lamborghini or Ferrari, and we would never want to get rid of that because it's sort of visceral as to how we've been growing up with vehicles. But the reality is car companies have been trying to take noise out of cars for the last multiple decades, whether it's, you know, luxury cars like Mercedes or BMW or Lexus or others. You know, the quiet ride has always been the one that most people prefer. You have a loud car, fast car, let's say, for a different type of application. So EVs give you that advantage of being extremely high performance and extremely comfortable to drive. So you get the best of both worlds there. Now, what you pay for that right now has been the cost of these batteries. They're expensive, let's say, versus their ICE or internal combustion engine comparison. But the number one biggest concern right now is the amount of adequate charging infrastructure in the US. And that's really what I've committed over a decade of my career, is to make sure that we're having DC fast charging everywhere and making sure that people will be able to charge at home when they can. But if they can't charge at home, if they live in a multi-unit dwelling, which the majority of our population in big cities live, that they have opportunities to fill up very quickly and conveniently and can exit that place, that spot that they charge or they fill up very quickly. And there's a master plans for this. It's happening in a big way.
This segment is sponsored by Rockbox Fitness Franchising. Take control of your destiny and join the boutique fitness revolution with Rockbox Fitness. If you're ready to make a real impact in your community and own your own business that empowers people to achieve their best life, then Rockbox is the opportunity you've been looking for. They provide comprehensive support from site selection, upfit, training, and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with confidence and a strong recurring revenue member base. Visit rockboxfitness.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more about this exciting venture in the fast-growing boutique fitness industry. It's time to turn your passion for fitness and for business into a thriving venture. Mike, can you speak to the time? Because again, my experience, very limited. I spent about 40 minutes or so to charge maybe 3/4 of the battery. But it was close to dead when I got there. and I think it was a Model 3 I think I had. Where is the future going? How fast will you be able to charge? Like what does future state look like?
That's great. So the future's now, by the way, on the highest end. Right now, my company, the company I'm affiliated with, Tritium, and other companies will basically add 200 miles of range to a Porsche Taycan in 12 minutes.
Wow.
So when you think about that, the average stay at a gas station is between 5 and 7 minutes. Today's state-of-the-art high-speed chargers, with those cars that can accept that speed, you can basically top off roughly 80% of your total battery in less than 15 minutes. And I've done this so many times where I've gone into a fast food place thinking, okay, I'm going to order something from the menu. I will use the bathroom and take a quick break, and I'll check an email or a text. And by the time I'm halfway through that, I'm already fully charged and ready for my next departure. So what we have to take a look at is older charging, or what's called level 2 charging, that is great overnight charging, or great if you're at work charging. So you pull in, you work 6-8 hours or 12-hour days, like some of the days I work, and you're easily going to get a full charge. You can do a reverse commute from where you work to home, so you don't need home charging. You can even plug these in 110 in your garage. You don't even need a level 2 charger, just level 1, 110, and you can add 20 to 30 to 50 miles a day of top off. But the real excitement is in the deployment of DC fast charging. Now, in the past, DC fast charging used to be 50 kilowatt power output. So if you had a 50 kilowatt hour battery, roughly, you charge it from 0 to 100 in roughly an hour. You know, the charge distribution on the batteries, we can talk about that, is not linear. It starts slow, it goes to peak, and then it tails off. However, when today's chargers are now hitting speeds of 150 or 3 times that, and even doubling to 300 kW and 400 kilowatt outputs. So with batteries that can accept that charge, these are high voltage batteries. That is today's new vehicles coming off the line, many of them from all of the OEMs. You can charge in 20 minutes and effectively give yourself an extra 250 miles of range. If you think about a gas-powered vehicle, some of these vehicles, the range is about 285 to 350 anyway. And so I've also run out of juice, being one of the early pioneers. But I have to admit, I've also run out of gas a few times.
This is fair.
I mean, who hasn't run out of gas once or twice or 3 times? Now, the advantage there, if you run out of gas, usually you can get someone to tow you to the nearest gas station, and the nearest gas station is pretty close, right? That's the difference. The accessibility of DC fast charging is nowhere near the gas pump today, and that's the beauty and the convenience. We're all driven by convenience. We're all wired for the immediate response. Nobody wants to wait around charging. But if you get to a location, you can charge pretty quickly now.
Yeah, so you've spoken to how the charging is getting faster, which is much more convenient, which is very American of us, right? Give it to us now. I mean, I just thought, you know, I travel a lot for business, and sometimes instead of taking a flight from one city to the other, if it's only like 4 hours, instead of going to the airport, and then, you know, I'll just drive. And I just realized like how vast this country really is, and you know, and how many gas stations and truck stops and all that. So I guess my question, I'm not making a very good point here. My question is, how long until you can go from one side of this country to the other and not worry about like, oh my God, I'm gonna be screwed halfway through Texas because I'm, you know, like when is what is that future state timeline?
Right. 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you can go cross country today with no problem in a Tesla. Tesla's done a phenomenal job. Other companies like Electrify America, EVgo, Blink, former company I was the CEO of. The amount of charging infrastructure to get you from city to city now in long distance cross country is easily done. In fact, it can be done on an electric motorcycle today with only 100 miles of range. I know good friends of mine who've done it. They've done the Cannonball Run, which is from New York City's Red Garage, I think they call it, to Redondo Beach, which is right there at the Portofino that I could see from here, with a 100-mile range electric motorcycle, cross country. Now, that takes a long time. You do have to charge up. But even for the car driver, the original thought in order to create lift and adoption was you have to get to, let's be more realistic, not everybody's driving cross country every day.
Sure.
Okay. However, if I go from Los Angeles to the Bay Area, I live in the LA South Bay, and my children are in the Bay Area where I raised them. And when I go to visit, I want to stop maybe once. I'd ideally not want to stop and do a 500-mile range vehicle, but I have no problem stopping for a quick sandwich and a bathroom break and then being on my way. Or let's say from LA to San Diego, or LA to Vegas, or New York to DC, or New York to Boston, or pick any major metropolis where you want to go from city to city to visit grandma's house or whatever it might be. It's very easily done today because these superchargers were first put out, and the high performance chargers were first put out between major corridors so that people would know that they didn't have to own 2 cars. They could actually make that trip. It would take a little time, but it can make the trip. But now what we're seeing is a much more important dynamic, which is to bring DC fast charging into the inner circles of the major cities where most people live. Because if you don't live in a single family home and have the luxury of plugging in, you do need access. And what we're starting to see now, for the first time in history, based on the recent administration NEVI project, which I won't go into the detail unless you ask, but what we're doing there is we're putting DC fast charging every 50 miles across pretty much every highway in every state. It's federal funding that gets distributed to the state DOTs, and the state DOTs bid to put them every 50 miles right off the highway. So it won't be too long. It's a couple of years more. It takes time, sort of government policy. There's lots of headwinds, but it won't be too long before you'll be able to easily access a multitude of DC fast charging in any highway you are on in any state, mostly, the high density population states. And you'll be able to also charge at your neighborhood shopping center while you may go in for groceries, a slice of pizza, or pick up your dry cleaning. You'll be able to charge for 20 minutes and get a completely full charge. So that is happening at a very rapid pace now. And that's the biggest problem with overall adoption. It's because if you don't have a place to charge, you're not going to make that investment. And then I'll talk about the battery costs as well, if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, what I want to take just a slight left turn here, and I have lots of different friends with lots of different beliefs and political beliefs and whatnot. And some of them I've found, that have electric vehicles are, very adamant about having an electric vehicle, and that they're clean energy, and that they're not hurting the environment. And my counter argument to that is, well, I mean, one, I applaud them for buying an electric vehicle, but my counter argument is, well, where do you think the energy is, the power is coming from that runs to your house or to charge it? And if you could speak to that, and again, not, we don't have to take a political side, but just speak to, like, we're still burning fossil fuels or maybe clean coal or something to get that power into the supercharger, into the car, correct? I mean, we're not there yet. Yeah.
So if you take a look at today's grid, it's about 45 to 50% renewables, and the remainder is natural gas, petroleum, and coal.
Okay.
Certainly, the electricity that we're putting into those cars, a lot of people are talking about, hey, if the energy is dirty, isn't it just as bad to drive an EV as it is a fossil fuel? The answer is unequivocally no.
Okay.
Car for car, first of all, zero emission vehicle, pure battery electric vehicle, zero emission car for car versus a highly emitting combustion engine.
Yep.
2 simple facts there. The electric motor is about 92% efficient and growing. Let's call it 90 to 95. No moving parts, very efficient. And the gas-powered vehicle or the mechanical engine, the combustion engine at a maximum is 30% efficient. You know, you've got grinding gears and combustion and a lot of friction. So 70% of that energy in that engine is lost to heat. And when you just look at the comparison of the vehicles, the zero-emission vehicles, clearly winner. Now, when you look upstream as to where that power is being generated, there's a lot of discussions right now about, you know, well, if it's dirty power powering your clean vehicle, aren't you just as dirty? But what we don't ever look at is how much electric energy is required to pump oil from the ground, to transfer that oil, and to refine that oil so that it ultimately comes out as a source of fuel for your carbon-emitting vehicle. And there's some crazy numbers. If you take a look at how many of these pump jacks, you know, you see these one-armed bandits or whatever they call them everywhere in Texas and California. It's like 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity to keep those pumps going. Then you have pipeline pumps to keep oil flowing. Then you have refineries. You could take a look at how many effectively gigawatts are required just to get oil into the vehicle. You can replace about 15 million EVs on the road with just the amount of energy required for oil refinement and distribution. Nobody talks about the electricity required for dirty fuel. So if you really do the wells to wheel comparison, clearly electric vehicles are cleaner overall, lower carbon emitting. And that's just at a grid where it's roughly 50% renewable. We're moving very rapidly toward the reduction in coal and the increase in renewable energies and solar and wind and others, to where as the grid gets greener, so does the vehicle. So the discussions around what you hear often about lithium mining and its impact to our environment. I mean, diesel particulate matter, which is also running these offshore wells or running the ports, Port of Long Beach, Port of LA, or any port, is so toxic that we're seeing like premature deaths due to asthma and lung disease in children who live around these ports. So it's not only carbon emissions to reduce the overall temperature of the climate, our global climate, but it's also massive air pollution. So we don't really have clean air where people live. So it's absolutely the case where electric vehicles are getting cleaner and cleaner. Batteries are becoming more recycled. Lithium mining is becoming, lots of innovations in lithium mining. And frankly, fossil fuels are going to be an exhaustible form of energy, and every oil company knows it.
Yeah. No, you know, thank you. Thank you, Mike. I have not heard that point of view, which really has changed my view of how I was thinking about it. I appreciate that. You just touched on this, but I want to go into this. You talked about, you know, electric motorcycles, and I've ridden motorcycles since I was a kid. I grew up on them.
Oh, cool. Not me. I just...
Yeah. Well, and you're creating a documentary called Chasing Electric. And it's about the electric motorcycle. Can you speak at length about this? I'd love to hear about this.
Thank you. Well, it's been a passion of mine. It's always been a mission. I'm very mission driven. You know, it seems like, I don't know, I'm chosen to take on grand challenges, you know, how to, you know, create the intersection of transportation and energy and drive humanity to a more efficient place where we drive better, we drive safer, we use better energy and cleaner energy. And that's where that capitalistic side of me comes in play. And so as I'd been, driving these early vehicles from the Chevy Volt, which you mentioned earlier, as a Schneider Electric pace car, we called it. And, it's a phenomenal experience. But I had been inspired when Harley Davidson announced an electric live wire. And this is Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
So if you think about, gas hogs and sound and vibration and heat, they sort of branded that as what's exciting in the freedom of the open road. But they came up with a phenomenal design. A guy named Vance Schrader, who was the chief designer, as well as under some direction from Jochen Zeitz, the CEO, who's sort of a Plan B guy and works, with Sir Richard Branson about what we can do for our environment. But beyond the environment stuff, this thing is a rocket. And
sure.
I decided I was going to endeavor down the path. It was a bit of that COVID, follow the passion of COVID. And I bought a Harley Livewire, and I'd been learning how to ride it in the LA area. And one thing led to another, and I found myself driven to overcome the corkscrew, which is probably the most iconic turn in all of motorsports that exists on Laguna Seca WeatherTech Raceway in Laguna Seca, Monterey. So I decided I was going to really archive the first time, the dawn of the electric motorcycle in professional motorcycle racing. And at that time, I trained with the #1 electric motorcycle racer, and I won't give up too much about the documentary, but within 1 week span, records were being made with electric motorcycle competing for the first time ever in history in motorcycle racing against internal combustion engine bikes. And I won't give you the spoiler alert, but there'll be there's a great outcome.
I love it. I can only imagine, because I've driven a Tesla and I've driven tons of, internal combustion engine vehicles and a lot of motorcycles, just the instant access you have to torque, off the line and, coming out of a corner, breaking into a corner, coming out of that corner, and how much faster you can get up to speed that versus, shooting through 6 gears. Wow.
That's the key.
Yeah.
And, still look, I want to be clear, the gas-powered vehicles, particularly in the racing circuit, are treasures.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting we get rid of gas-powered race vehicles, okay? Cars, bikes, or other. I mean, we still race horses today.
Sure.
Go into that. Those used to be a form of transportation. You don't want to remove the spirit of the race. And gas-powered vehicles are very light and tuned over the last 80 years to race at extremely high levels of performance. But if you think about it, no matter what, because you can't get that full torque until you reach the highest RPM, you have a gearbox. And that gearbox, no matter what, going back to engineering, is a compromise. Some people love it. The sound of those gears, it's a compromise. You get a straight linear power curve with an EV, and you made a good point. If you're able, top line, a gas bike will beat an electric vehicle today. In the future, they'll probably do two gear. But if you're able to get out of the turn quicker, that's how races are won. Because the top line you're only going to see on the fastest straight. But most of this is getting out of the turn the quickest. And so there's some really exciting things to come. I believe there'll always be great competition. Gas bikes aren't going away. Gas cars aren't going away on the racing circuits. Look at Formula One. Yeah. But the world is going to be pretty interesting pretty soon.
Yeah. Mike, I know that there's a lot that goes into making a documentary and a movie and the editing and all that. Do you have just an idea? We're recording this obviously in the June of 2024. Any idea on when that will be released and available to watch?
I do. if we get it right. So 1 year ago, July 23rd, 2023 was when all this happened. So the goal was to release the movie 1 year after the events happened. And so far we're on that time frame. So fingers crossed we'll have it out in about a month.
I love it. By the time this podcast goes to air, that should be right on track. I love it.
Very cool.
Let's pivot because I promised the listeners you have been quite a successful investor, and this show is about business, health, and wealth. And we've talked about business today. Clean energy kind of applies to health and clean atmosphere, but from a wealth perspective and building wealth, you've been ahead of the curve on a couple of several different fronts. And almost like you've had a crystal ball kind of knowing where this is going. I think you've also chased your passion, which is wonderful too. What philosophy do you take or philosophies do you apply as you're looking for an investment, as you're looking for a company to invest in? And just speak to that, please.
Great. And by the way, an important takeaway out of all the investing is the amount of failures that we're going to see. So, first thing, if I could share some real world experience, it's staying resilient. And I think there's a recent clip from Roger Federer who made a commencement speech, and he said, throughout his career, he won 54% of the points, and he lost the
46.
46. And so really what I'd like to say is, my philosophy is I'm always looking for disruptive innovations. What does that mean? Disruptive innovations, there's some great works by Clayton Christensen and to some extent Jeffrey Moore. I spent some time with Jeffrey Moore, by the way, in taking his crossing the chasm concepts and dialoguing whether he felt that EVs were in a similar way. And I sort of shared some thoughts with him, and him and I collaborated on the concept of EVs in crossing the chasm. But Clayton Christensen's really, in the Innovative Dilemma, talks through the importance of disruptive innovation. And what does that mean? Can you get a 10x step change in applying a technology that may be used for something else, but starts to then come down in cost significantly, where now you're causing a step change, a 10 times change in a new market? And a great example is lithium batteries we've used for cell phones, handheld drills, portable devices, all sorts of small technologies, handheld technologies. But Martin Eberhard was a master at taking batteries and stuffing them in things. I spoke to him very early days about the first handbook, pre-Kindle. And Martin applied that to this Lotus chassis to see if he could stuff these same batteries into a vehicle. And you have to give him credit there. And Elon certainly has an eye for, maybe more than anyone in our time, for disruptive innovations. So I've always looked at, the whole look where the puck is going, not where it is. But you have to have some vision to understand what really drives people. And at the end of the day, our core is like, we survive, we fuel our bodies, we procreate. But at the end of the day, we tend to walk and tend to talk, right? We communicate and we travel. And we're coming to the point of communication where we're seeing the singularity of our entire collective intelligence at our fingertips. That's certainly disruptive innovations. This cell phone, this camera, we're virtually at the same location today, thinking identically, yet thousands of miles away. And we tend to walk, or we tend to travel. And now we're traveling very fast from point A to point B. Elon's, thinking about getting to Mars. So at the end of the core, it's what do we need as a society that will benefit us? For the naysayers and the doom and gloomers, we've never been in a better position since humanity to live forever, virtually, or with carbon or other. I don't want to go into the details. Spent a lot of time with Ray Kurzweil, but we have an opportunity here to live better, to better serve humanity. And so I've always looked for those areas because that's where you're going to get tremendous investment potential. Now, what comes with that is a lot of failures. So a VC mentality, venture capital mentalities, invest money in these disruptive innovations, knowing they might hit 1 out of 10 and maybe even 1 out of 20, depending on the capital markets and the management, et cetera. But I saw a diamond in the rough with Blink when it was car charging group. And that's one example, but there's many investment opportunities in the capital markets today that people can take advantage of. And it's not easy.
No. One, I appreciate that you shared that failure is part of this. Failure is how we learn, and you have to place enough bets that you're going to have a winner, because most of them won't be winners. But as you said, and it's not just 10x, so that's 10x changed, for a technology, just the disruption. I would argue that for the return, though, when it's a 10x changed in a disruption way, it's 100 or 1,000% or 1,000x return on the investment, because it makes it, and that's what you have to do. I think Jeff Bezos talked about, in baseball, a grand slam walk-off homer, the most runs you can score is 4. That's it. That's the best you can ever do in baseball. But in business, you can score 1,000 runs, 2,000 runs. There's no limit to how many runs you can score when you actually connect with the ball. And
good analogy.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's kind of what you said, really, just different words. This segment is sponsored by Beamlight Sauna Franchising. Are you looking to take control of your destiny and own your own business? If you want a great brand in a rapidly growing market, well, Beamlight Sauna is a nationwide health and wellness franchise with amazing opportunities in select markets. You can bring the power of infrared sauna and red light therapy to your community while you build a thriving business. Beamlight Sauna offers support that includes site selection, build out, even pre-launch programs and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with a large recurring revenue member base. To learn more about business ownership and franchise opportunities in the fast-growing health and wellness space, go to beamlightsauna.com. That's B-E-E-M lightsauna.com, and click on franchise opportunities to learn more. Well, if we can take a few minutes for a final few questions. You had mentioned a couple authors, Crossing the Chasm. As an investor, as somebody that is looking for disruptive technology, is looking to, hey, I don't want to just do the same old. I want to be part of movements, of changes, of wholesale overhauls of an industry. Is there, a book or 2 or 3 or anything, or an author in particular that you could recommend to the listeners that would just get them thinking out of the box in a different way?
Certainly Clayton Christensen is a great established book so that people can really understand what that disruptive innovation is. Andy Grove said, who was a leader at Intel, if it's a little faster, a little cheaper, and a little better, you're dead. So you really need to see things that cause those disruptive innovations. Then I would also say, keep your eye on Crunchbase, because that's where all of the new innovative startups are being funded by the VCs, many of them pedigree VCs. And those pedigree VCs know how to, they know how to pick them, but they also know how to nurture them from the very early startup phase as an early entrepreneur who sticks to that vision, who sticks to that mission, and then, grows the business accordingly, knows how to preserve capital when needed, but also knows not to be too conservative where you have to reinvest in R&D. So I keep my eye on Crunchbase. I'm an advisor, an investor myself. And I also look at, mega trends. Mm-hmm. So this was some work's done early on. Mega trends, when you look at the semiconductor industry as an example, and a mega trend, when I spoke about that singularity. Some people, what the hell are you talking about here? Get back to earth here. Well, at our fingertips right now, we can hit ChatGPT and get the answer to any dialogue and narrative that's in our brain at our disposal. We can get the world's collective thinking at our disposal. That's a power of AI. The power of AI to make our roads safer to travel. So when we want to go to grandmother's house, we get there safely, because humans are fallible, and yet we're highly intelligent. And yet, so we can take our collective intelligence at our disposal now. So when you look at those disruptive innovations, you have to say, well, what are the things that are critical for us? You know, we do things poorly. Our legal system is not so great. Our medical system is not so great. Now, with due respect, you know, our medical system is state of the art. We're doing better now than we ever have, but there's so much more to go. You know, we have tragedy in this world, and there's so much more to go, and AI really helps that. So who are the people who are going to capitalize on AI? Now, if you watch CNBC, you'll see NVIDIA has done the best job of that right now, because effectively they're the semiconductor base, back to semiconductors, hardware technology. And I always believed in hardware. Software is great investment because low capital risk, and software is still very hot. But if you're able to do hardware right, Elon Musk, Jensen Huang, you're able to do there's many others. If you're able to do hardware right, that's a pretty good moat that you can deliver, and it's really hard to do. But if you look at NVIDIA, I mean, I was in it in sub 200 pre-split. I was in Tesla at 30, something like that, very early going. Well, you don't have to put a lot of money, and you should expect that not all these are going to play out. But I think, to your point, NVIDIA's gone to the moon since a few years ago. And so has Tesla, even though it's given back. So there's some challenges in the EV market today, but it's going to come back. And we never measure any one market. And this is important for investors. Don't measure the market by a quarterly result. You know, being a public company CEO, I can tell you there were times when I didn't want to give guidance, like screw guidance. I'm sorry. We're not a industrial cyclical $20 billion revenue enterprise that looks at a quarterly basis. We're building a future in 2 to 3 or 4 years. So we never measure any industry based on any quarter results, even any annual results, because you have to take a look at the vision. So I'm a strong believer in sometimes you may know more than herd mentality, which will tend to chase the shiny object up and down quarter to quarter, when in fact, you're like, look at Amazon as a great example. To your point on Bezos, one of the best leaders we've seen. I don't think he made money for a decade.
Yeah. Okay.
So profits, EBITDA, negative. I may be wrong for a decade, because he was building something a lot bigger.
And he told his investors, the public investors, he's like, and we don't plan to make money anytime soon. So if you're here for a quick buck, we're the wrong stock, you know?
And now the EV market, you know, there's a lot to talk about, but you know, the SPAC trajectories and some of the challenges with the capital markets, with the inflationary period, you know, people got zero propensity for non-profitable companies. And I get it, because you can put your money elsewhere. But if you have some fortitude and some risk capital, you know, get your investment part of your portfolio in line so that you don't have to think about that. You know, use the Warren Buffett mentality there. Let it make money for you while you're asleep. But if you have risk capital, look for what you believe could be those disruptive innovations, and you'll start to see some of them do quite well, because we're in this sort of massive renaissance of tech boom. It hasn't changed, man. And it's so incredible. I'm so inspired for another 30 years of massive growth in tech as AI gets incorporated with transportation, eventually quantum computing, space travel. I mean, we're in a massive renaissance, and it's good to be part of it.
It was cool, man. I just watched you just light up talking about that. That was really cool. You just came alive talking about that. Two final questions. One, I can't wait to hear your answer for this. I always ask my guests, hey, if we fast forward to the end of your life, and you know you're going to live this wonderful life, and you already have, but we get to the end, wherever that is, and we're at your funeral, and a loved one is reading your eulogy, and they're only allowed 3 descriptive words, Mike. They're allowed to pick any 3 words they want to describe the way you impacted them, or the legacy you left, what 3 words do you hope they use to describe your life?
Well, first of all, there won't be any funeral, because by the time that'll happen, we will be living forever in some way. But I know that's going to become an obsolete way to look at it. But first things that come to mind is my sisters will be there. They're a little older than me, so I don't know how that'll work out. But they'll kind of say, "Well, he's still just a little shit in our mind." And I stay humble, and to some extent, we can't be perceived greater than we are. We're all human. We all have struggles. We all go through the ups and downs of life and emotions. So I would say that time won't come, and here's why I'm saying that. I'm not evading the question, but in the not too distant future, Ray Kurzweil predicted it in 2040. Our brain waves, our brain scans, everything that makes us salient and human can be transmitted into a different medium. We have a carbon-based medium that hosts all our thoughts and brains and neurons today, and that's improving. Like, we're going to extend the lives of our carbon bodies. And I look at it as, yes, I'm in my 3rd trimester, so I've got tremendous energy. I never look at retirement. I've got another trimester to go, but like you were saying. But by the time, if we hang on here, my kids, I think, will have no problem. They could live to 120, 130. And everything that makes us human, our thoughts, our memories, our ability to process, our ability to see, can be loaded in another medium. And yes, it won't be the same. But I don't think that funeral's coming, because I think if we do it right, we're going to be one with everybody else. We're going to be thinking the same way, and we could find ourselves, and this will sound very odd, immortal. And then it's a good analogy for startups, because in a startup company, one day you're immortal, and the next day you're dead, and then the next day you're immortal again. Let's say, I don't know if I could answer that question, but
I think you did. I think you did.
Let's see in the future.
This is, I don't know, episode 80 or 85 or something I've done of these, and that by far, it was the most thought-provoking, coolest answer I've ever heard to that question. So you win the prize. I love it. Most important question: where can people follow you, connect with you, just be part of your journey as you keep doing this?
Thank you. So, I'm still a business guy at heart. So LinkedIn, I have a voice on LinkedIn, and, you could see the business journey on LinkedIn. So it's Mike Calise. I use Mike versus Michael. And then, Instagram, I am a little bit hooked on it, where I keep a beginner's mind, and I'm constantly learning about health and wealth and business. I think Instagram's a great forum there. I'm Mike Calise EV on Instagram, and I use Facebook predominantly for friends and family. So I would say LinkedIn is the best way, and Instagram, you might see some of my more recreational things, like on that motorcycle, or on some golf course somewhere, hopefully.
Love it. Love it. We'll put both of those in the show notes, right? So people just click right on it and go right there to follow you. So fantastic. I want to tell you, this has been really, really fun. This is one of the more interesting shows we've done, and it's because of you. So I'm just grateful for you coming on here, and I really, really appreciate just the expertise and the opinions and the passion that you shared today.
Roger, I'm really profoundly humbled, and thank you for the time today. It was great getting to know you and having this great chat, and I look forward to more. And thank you for making this happen.
Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, thrivemorebrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.